Good morning. This is Morning at NTV. This morning, we're talking about something very important. Just right, looking at the time now is 7:57. You've already probably had breakfast if you're already at work. You've taken something. You've had an apple, some yogurt, a Rolex, a sumbusa, whatever you had this morning. If you didn't make it yourself, even if you did cook it yourself, there's a chain to how that got to you as a consumer. And do you know the standards are enforced in the entire food supply chain? You got it from a supermarket, let's say, it had an expiry date. Did you even bother to look at that? Even if you had issues to do with quality, who would you go to? Who would you turn to report? If you had issues with your health after you've consumed something from a certain place, what are the enforcements there? Who do you turn to then say, these people are serving food that is not healthy for me? What are the bare minimum standards for not just food, but also drink, to also the manufacturer, in the service delivery, additives in our food? So who's checking all of this? Uganda National Bureau of Standards. And with me in studio, I have the acting manager for the Standards Department, and that is Mufumbiro Hakim Baligea. Good morning.
Good morning, Flavia.
Yes, we've been having a very interesting conversation off air. So I'm guessing after this, people are going to know enough. We all eat.
Okay.
Or drink.
Yes.
You are fasting.
Absolutely.
And at a certain time, I'll go all in. You'll break your fast and you will eat.
Exactly.
Your concern will be to tame hunger.
Yes.
It won't be questions on a list. Where did my food come from? Who cooked it? What was the environment? And a lot of people now break their fast in restaurants as well.
That's true.
So there are standards that the restaurant should be maintaining. We've seen restaurants being closed because the kitchen, outside it looks very nice. It's very organized, but the kitchen at the back is not cleaned as much as it should be cleaned. So I want us to really elaborate all of this. But let's talk about food safety, food quality, food hygiene. So why are these aspects? Are they different? Are they interlinked? Talk to us.
Thank you, Flavia. Good morning, viewers. As introduced, my name is Hakim Mufumbiro. I work at Uganda National Bureau of Standards, in charge of standards development. Straight away, I think, one, the reason food safety, food hygiene, and food quality would be related is that they feed into one another.
Yes.
For you to ensure that you actually have a safe food, you must have prepared it from a hygienic place. So that's why hygiene is actually
food
important.
Hygiene, yes.
So you must be able to handle the food well. The people handling the food must be the right people, and they should be. That's how you get the assurance that the food is actually safe to the final consumer. The quality of the food is normally related to suitability. Probably maybe appearance, the color of the food, the taste of the food is not related mainly to what would actually make you probably sick when you actually eat the food.
Yeah.
So safety is much more related to hazards that may actually come with the food. May be residues, they could be things that actually unwanted in the food, and then they could actually cause you to become sick as a result of eating the food. So by ensuring food safety, we are giving that assurance that actually when you prepare and handle the food, the consumer is actually protected, that the food is safe for them to consume. And you can only be sure about the safety of the food if you have handled the hygiene aspects before even you consume the food. That is the interlinkage in there. Okay,
so would I be right to say that the food quality and safety goes to, for example, if I'm having my tomatoes and what, the farmer?
Yes.
Then the food hygiene is to eventually me or whoever is going to cook the food and the environment that this food is in.
Yes.
So you have a code that is to do with food and drink and manufacturing of food. And for example, it stipulates that food or drink manufacturing should ensure hygiene, health, and safety in all aspects.
Yes.
Now, there's also production of food, which means you are at the manufacturing, the processing level.
Yes.
What are the bare minimum standards there?
Okay, well, and as you put it, at UNBS, the standards that we set are actually the bare minimum that you will find in the industry. What we're trying to promote is that standards are generally universal, so you'd expect that if everyone meets the same standard, you would be having the products that you'll find in the market should be really the same.
Yes.
We don't stop anyone from implementing even higher standards.
Okay. The
classic example you would probably give is probably someone is producing maybe milk in a food establishment. You'd expect that they are producing it from a facility that has been gazetted to produce that particular product. the environment within which they actually produce the milk is the right one. They actually do the right cleaning. The people who handle the food are the right people. They have been medically examined, and the reason they actually be medically examined is because they could transfer diseases to the food, because they are handling the food. And for many products which are probably touched by people during processing, maybe fruits or vegetables or something like that, there is a possibility that if I'm sick and I've not been medically examined, I should be able to transmit some of the contagious diseases to the food. So the environment within which the food is processed is very critical, because it affects the final product. And what we normally do is we focus on what should be the minimum bare facilities for you to actually ensure that the food is safe, in terms of the surface, for example, where the food is being produced, in terms of the equipment in the industry, in terms of the finishing that has actually been done. The way you'd construct your kitchen, for example, in your home, in a residential home, is not the same way a food establishment is constructed. Mm-hmm. The materials that actually go in there should be non-toxic, should not be able to have other contaminants that could come into contact with the food. So those are the considerations that we actually put in place.
Yeah, you talk about gazetting, and I mean, I understand that for a restaurant or a factory or processing plant, where they can actually, when they have the capacity, the resources to gazette a certain area.
Yes.
Now, sometimes, yes, the environment matters, but they might be so cordoned off that it doesn't matter who's outside the gate or the fence, but as long as the standards in agreed. But you said milk. Let me use that as an example. Okay. For someone who is having their 2-3 cows, milking their cows into the jug, covering it and selling to the neighbors.
Yes.
The standards still apply there?
They do. They do. As I probably hinted on earlier, standards cover everyone. Okay. And that is why we actually develop minimum standards, taking into consideration all the different levels in the production chain. The reason we do that is because there are very many people within the production chain who are different levels.
Yes, so because that's a different level to the gestures of the day.
Yeah, so we tend to make sure that we take care of everyone in that chain.
But then how would you check someone like that? Because I don't think they're checked. Because if the guy milking his cows has whatever, he has coughs into, sells it to 5 other people, it has already moved on. Yeah. But you're not checking this person. You're checking the bigger ones.
Yeah.
So how do you actually manage along that chain?
Well, I think that has been one of the challenges with the smallholder, mainly farmers that we have actually in the country. Yeah. We are majorly a country with smallholder farmers, and having regulation with working within smallholder farmers is a little bit of a challenge. But I think one of the mechanisms that we're now using is to encourage most of the farmers to actually join probably cooperatives or farmer groups, so that we can actually be able to target and provide
those
exactly
within cooperatives then
exactly. So they should, because they are closer to their own members than we are. And we have done that for specific value chains, where we have trained some of these farm organizations and associations, and actually we have been starting to see the changes.
Some change.
And one of the other ways that we actually take care of some of the local or smaller farmers or associations is that because standards remain technical, we have realized that actually not very many people, even those that are educated, are able
understand
to cope,
them.
understand and actually be able to implement them. So my mother, who has only 2 cows and is she's trying to implement the standard for probably how the right milking should be done.
If the cow is also sick.
Exactly. So we have now developed easy to use materials, which are in form of Victoria, and for purposes of promoting and creating a wide awareness about standards, and to let everyone know that standards are actually easy to implement. They're not complicated. They're not for the wealthy and educated. They're for everyone.
Definitely.
And the changes actually been we are starting to see those changes in the market.
So this code also has or caters for things like forget food safety, personal hygiene, distribution and transport.
Yes.
Talk to us about that specifically, because yes, I've seen, forget the cows being transported when they are alive. There's that meat also. And someone was complaining that there was caveras with soup on a border, and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's very critical, and we probably need to, we just celebrated World Food Safety Day just last week. On 7th of June, which was a statement to show that food safety must be put on the political agenda for everyone to know that this is actually serious. Starting from, for example, the way people transport animals, we have actually put in place the minimum standards which are required for you to actually put animals in a fuso truck or in any other truck that's supposed to be...
So let me ask, and this is quite generic, if I transport my cows in a painful way, you've seen them on those trucks, you know, bent in one way, but they're alive. Does it really matter?
It matters.
What is the correlation from me transporting the goats and the cows in a very inhumane way, I'd call it, trickling down to standards or the hygiene of food?
One of the known what should I call it?
Like, is it a correlation between the two?
There is, because what happens is, if you're transporting an animal and it's actually stressed, it will end up affecting the quality of the meat because of the stress that actually the animal has gone through.
So my stressed goat eventually will give me bad meat at the end of the day?
The meat will not be of quality because of the stress that's actually trying to release as a result of being...
And there's proof of this?
There is
It's actually what,
proof.
Poisonous?
It may not be that poisonous, but it's not desirable to the consumer.
Is that on how it looks? Also?
Not necessarily. Even the taste would change because of the biochemical changes that actually occur in the meat after slaughter. So, but coming back to the point of transporting meat, for example, there's been a lag between, for example, the abattoir and the butchery, how the meat leaves the abattoir and finally gets to the butchery, where you actually find us, where all of us find us and buy. But some years back, we engaged with the Ministry of Agriculture and the local authority, Kampala City Council, Capital City Authority, to enforce in terms of ensuring that the equipment that they're using for transporting the meat is of the right quality, because you don't use any container, because the container is in contact with the food. So it must be the right container to avoid any contact to the meat.
So I don't wrap my meat in a sack from to Kampala?
Exactly, yeah. So it's not the right packaging. It may be it may
at the time effective for me.
Yeah, but it's not the right packaging, because it will affect the end product, and of course the hygiene comes in, because if you're using the same sack to actually transport the animal, you just imagine how would you actually be able to clean it? Is it very easy, other than using the right material of to transport the same item? So those are some of the areas that we have been collaborating with, and it's good that now
for the distribution and transport.
Exactly. Now we actually went into a collaboration of a memorandum of understanding with the Kampala Butchers Traders Association, and the reason we did that is because we know that they actually have very many members, for example, in Kampala, and we should be able to support them in terms of understanding why standards matter and being able to actually reach the level of self-regulation.
Okay, so we've talked about, we're talking actually about the food supply chain. We've talked about food hygiene itself. We've talked about, for example, those that are manufacturing and processing the food. We've now talked about distribution and transport. Let's talk about cleaning and storage, because as much as that is storage from one village to another, or from one place to another, the abattoir to wherever, there's also, now it has gotten to me, or it has got, even the restaurants, by the way, sometimes they keep a lot of meat or chicken frozen.
That's true.
So are there also bare minimum standards of how long you can freeze that chicken, how long you can freeze that meat, what kind of storage it is in your facility? Do you check that?
We do, and the first point of entry is to provide the bare minimum. That if you're handling meat or fish or vegetables, they should be, one, handled at the right temperature. Two, they should be stored separately, because of,
I was about to say that sometimes we put the dodo with the fish and the meat.
Exactly, yes. To avoid cross-contamination of the food, because these are different, they have different
suppliers as well.
Suppliers and levels of contamination are different. And three, if they are being handled, they should be handled by a person who understands that the reason they are handling that food is because they are probably different, and there will be an effect on
so
the way they are
actually handled. So say in the restaurant, is the chef the one supposed or mandated to handle that, or every facility or restaurant should then hire someone who is well versed with the standards? Is that what's supposed to happen? Because
we actually have standards for the catering industry,
yes,
that help the service industry in terms of how the hygiene requirements in these facilities. What the chef should be able to do is for them to understand the impact that their activities actually have.
Yes.
And their role is to actually ensure that part of their team is able to implement those particular requirements.
Okay.
And if everyone actually understands, and for sure, we have been actually doing joint enforcement, for example, with KCCA, regarding visiting some of the kitchens of the hotels, the major hotels in Kampala, to understand how they actually prepare and make the food ready for the consumers. And we go through the entire system of understanding how the kind of water they use, and all the facilities available to the staff. And for example, the issue of medical examination of staff is actually done by the local authority, which is the Kampala City Council Authority, but it's expected to be done across the country for all the food establishments, because we have all the enabling
laws. And this medical
laws.
examination, is it for everyone at the back end in the kitchen, or even the ones the waitresses, the waiters? And
it is mainly people who come in contact with the food. Those are the main critical ones.
Okay.
Because other than the ones who may not be coming in contact, because we are looking at the potential to cause to introduce hazards to the food.
To transport either
exactly,
germs or bacteria on the food.
So the ones who are very far away may not be a big problem. The focus should be, the bare minimum is the people who are actually handling the food should be medically examined.
Okay, so that is on cleaning and storage. Talk to me about zoning of areas. What does that mean? Are you cordoning off certain areas for food safety? What does that mean?
Well, zoning depends on their specific establishments that produce different products.
Yes.
And the reason the zoning is important is if you're producing, for example, peanuts in the same factory where you're producing soya or maize flour or something like that, they should be run differently, because they have different particular hazards that actually come with those products. Some of them might have chemicals that are actually not desired in the other products. So there is need to have clear zoning of some of those facilities to actually ensure that the product lines are separated from one another, and there is clear line. Even
allergens, I know that when you go to certain restaurants, they can specify this food has nuts, this food doesn't have nuts, this food has soy, this one doesn't have, because some people's bodies react differently. For example, I have allergens to red meat.
Okay.
So if you even dropped soup of meat into my beans, there'd be trouble.
Yeah.
So sometimes, one of our viewers actually said that he's worried because the same chijiko that picks the peas, they don't have time to get another spoon. The restaurant will use the same spoon in the meat, in the chicken. And so, you don't really know who's eating what, and they end up having issues and they say the beans made me sick. But when truly, it was that chicken soup that was mixed somehow in there.
True.
So food additives, I know there's supposed to be a maximum limit for food additives in food.
Yes.
Is it a maximum limit for the type of food additives or just food additives?
Well, probably we could take an example of a particular food for us to understand what the additives should be. If, for example, you're taking juice, we make a lot of juice in Uganda, locally manufactured. Now, the person who is producing the juice will put a preservative. Because I'm sure you're
talking about the packaged juices.
Exactly, yes. So they'll put the preservative to ensure that the juice stays on the shelf for probably 1 year or something like that. Now, for that juice to stay for that whole time, the preservative has to make sure that the effect is actually it has to be put in the right quantity to ensure that the effect is obtained of that preservative. Now, the impact, what we take care of in the food additives is they must be put in those maximum limits. Other than outside of that, the levels actually become dangerous to you when you actually consume the food.
Yes.
So we focus on ensuring that the additives are put in the right quantities and in the right food. Not all additives go into every single food. So the additive that you will use in fruit juice cannot be used in milk, cannot be used in meat, or the ones that are used in meat.
Any other beverage.
Exactly, yeah. So that's one of the areas that...
So maybe I don't really understand this, and I'm not sure. I always aim for food that has no preservatives, because you read that this is a healthy way to go.
Okay.
But then you find there's some juice that is packaged in a box and it says no preservatives. What is that supposed to mean? That it shouldn't be on that shelf for long? That it just has some magical essence in it that it can last for more than a certain time without preservatives?
Well, there are different ways of processing, and depending on how the food has been processed, determines which kind of measures you actually put in place to ensure that actually stays longer on the shelf. So if probably it was filled when it was hot, then you probably would think that the microorganisms in the food, or the germs for the lemon, if you like, would be limited, because that is what eventually spoils the food.
Yes.
So what is important is the kind of processing that's actually been done.
To keep that on the shelf for that time.
Yes.
So when it comes to, because if you're getting on the shelf, you've packaged, and we're not going to discourage business, obviously, but as you said, you're setting minimum standards.
That's true.
I see some foods, of course, or some products having that UNBS quality mark.
Yes.
Which, to a Ugandan, once I see that, I know I am safe. But you are maybe putting it on a food product that has an expiry date, let's say, manufactured and expiry date.
Yes.
And I don't know how far you go in. You can probably tell us your jurisdiction here on checking in that supermarket, in that duka, that they've not kept that product beyond its storage time or shelf life. Do you check that? Because, you know, we're Ugandans, and we rarely check expiry dates.
Yeah.
You pick, you go, you keep at home. Sometimes you forget, then you get it from the shelf and you eat, you know. So when those terms are you, do you actually check the supermarkets over time and say this should get off the shelf or not?
I think that's one of the areas that we are now getting even more firm on the ground.
Good.
Because our surveillance department is now fully established, and the good news is effective 1st July, which is the next financial year, we're going to be decentralizing that service. One of the challenges we have been having is that we have been having problems of a smaller team running across the entire country. Now they'll be positioned in all the different regions, most of the different regions, eastern, western, and northern to start with. And their role is to actually go and check in the market the products that actually, which might be even certified, still meeting the standards. And expired is one of the areas that we actually look at, because once the food has expired, probably shouldn't actually be on the shelf.
Yes.
So, but one of the other mechanisms that we actually use is collaborating with the local government. And I hinted on earlier, we have done extremely very well, for example, with the Capital City Authority. We have already signed an MOU, and the reason we have done that is for us to actually engage in joint enforcement.
I've seen them close down some
supermarkets,
so, food services.
That's true. That's true. So because we may not have all the resources that are required, the government may not give us all the money that we actually want to clean up the market. We are focusing on leveraging on other institutions' resources to ensure that we actually undertake enforcement. So if someone is in local government somewhere in Iganga or in Katuna or in Kisoro, they should be able, the local government there should be able to see that actually when I go to a supermarket, I should be able to find products which are expired. And recently, I saw on NTV, they had closed one of the supermarkets in Fort Portal, or one of the districts in Western Uganda, because of bad products in the supermarket. So it's actually possible to be done.
Okay. Before we get into counterfeit, do you check, we talked about quality as well, and sometimes, especially, there are plenty of products that are not made here. They're not made in Uganda.
Yes.
They come to us from different foreign markets. And sometimes, let's be honest, I think you've had this through the grapevine, that really this is being brought to Africa just for the sake of it. It's not really good for consumption, or it's not good for our bodies, you know. It has too many additives, too many this, too many that. Just talk to us in terms of also checking those products that come from different markets. Okay. Do you check that, you know, it might be a product that works in another market, but really it shouldn't work for our Ugandans? Ideally,
what we do is that because we are mandated to actually check all the imports that come into the country, and our imports inspection is very firm and has grown for the last 10 or 15 years or so. And we are now implementing the pre-export verification of conformity, which means that even before products come into Uganda, they should have met the Ugandan standard. That's what we are to even be brought in. Exactly. Yes, yeah. So we are present at most of the entry points, so we are able to check that the products actually are coming in have been tested in the countries of origin to ensure that they're actually fine for the Ugandan market. So we are expanding to all the other borders, including entry points in Mombasa, Dar es Salaam, and all where our cargo comes in.
So you don't just bring everything and anything to Ugandan?
Not so.
So
not
before
so.
we wind up, let's talk about counterfeit. I know that Ugandans are street smart.
Yes.
They'll find a way to have a certain stamp that looks like a certain stamp on a certain product. So I'm sure you've heard of counterfeiting or actually faking the UNBS stamp. But outside, they're doing that because the actual product is counterfeit. So how far are you with checking counterfeit products because they're already on the market?
Yeah.
And the consumer may not be able to see the difference. And I know there's, of course, now awareness out there, but the anti-counterfeit network,
yes.
they're trying to make sure that we can see the differences, that, you know, we check whatever products we're using and see the difference. But as UNBS, how far are you working with the anti-counterfeit network, or you're working alone on this?
No, I think for counterfeit is a bigger problem. And it
generates money, so you're fighting.
you're fighting big cartels and certain businesses. But to start with is we start from where we actually are able to regulate.
Okay.
Our first point of entry is that we have control of the products that are produced in the country, as well as products that are actually coming into the country. Okay. And of course, counterfeiters are really unscrupulous, which we don't really promote. Those are unscrupulous business people. And many times it's very difficult for even the regulators to tell some of the differences.
Oh,
because,
that's not good.
Like you've indicated, they're probably even smart because they understand the market and they're trying to get through to the market. One of the efforts that was put in place by the government was to actually put in place a counterfeit bill that has been discussed for quite a very long time because the mandate of UNBS is majorly on substandard products, which may not necessarily be counterfeit products.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't meet certain standards versus it's absolutely different from the original product.
So we focus mainly on the substandard products, but we are in the same regulatory space. So we ensure that everything that's actually on the market meets the standards. And actually, as we roll out next financial year for the mandatory certification, where we're going to require that all products on the market that are produced within the country have a quality mark, will probably be managing some of the challenges that actually we're having in the country.
Fantastic. And in case you want to know more about counterfeit here on NTV, we have a show called Don't Be Fake with the Anti-Counterfeit Network, so people can always watch that and get the difference with some footsteps. As we wind up, probably I want you to speak to the consumer, the average Ugandan, on as UNBS, what you believe are those maybe pointers that they should note or keep in mind with their products. Yes. Yeah,
I think for the average consumer, one is that as regulators, we have a role to protect the consumers. That is why we exist, and to ensure that consumers only consume the products that are of the right quality and safety is guaranteed. And we do that through all the services that we actually offer. One of the things that probably consumers would have to look out for, from using your eyes, you would actually see that the product doesn't meet the requirements through the labeling. Most of the products you'll find is that the labels are not well put, or they are faded, or the inscriptions are not there. And one of our key messages is look out for products that bear the quality mark. Okay. And as I indicated earlier, we are now going full blast next financial year to ensure that all the products that are sold on the market must be certified by UNBS, and that will go a long way in providing that confidence to the consumers that UNBS is actually present with them on a daily basis.
Definitely, to ensure food safety in the country, and also at least give us the minimum food standards in Uganda. Thank you so much to the Acting Manager for Standards Department, Mufumbiro Hakim Baligia. Thank you so much from Uganda National Bureau of Standards. You're still watching Morning at NTV.